Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and today we're going to talk about something similar to what we've done in the past, but a little bit different. Back when I did my predictions videos on the various units for ogres and corn and all that stuff, I did mention that I wanted to do some separate videos talking about mechanics and things that I would really like to see changed about the various factions. Now, when it comes to corn and the greenskins, there's really not necessarily a lot I would change about them, because overall, I think those factions actually have pretty exceptional gameplay, but the ogres are a different story. So while for the greenskins and corn, I think I'm going to focus mostly on the new types of content coming to the game, being like the DLC and all that stuff. For the ogres, we have so much to talk about. This video is going to be pretty much dedicated to just that, talking about things that I would like to see changed for the Ogre Kingdoms as a faction with 6.0. So without further ado, let's hop into it. I'd like to first start with contracts. Ogre contracts are a bit of a strange system at the moment. So for those who haven't played an Ogre Kingdom campaign in a while, they're basically this thing that you get starting, I think, on turn 10, where every 10 turns you get 3 contracts and you can select one of them. And basically, it's always a, hey, go over here and either kill this character or occupy this city or sack this city, and we'll give you some money, maybe a diplomacy bonus, and if you're lucky, a magic item. That's the general gist. But sometimes they'll just give that army like a lot of meat, which is a pretty terrible reward. I much prefer when they have cool items, but they tend to be kind of meh. So what are the changes that I think should come to the contract system? Well, the big thing for me is that I personally find it really annoying how the contract system selects who it's coming from. One of the big issues is that the gameplay for the ogres generally encourages you to build an empire. Although you cannot build major settlements, you can only build minor settlements. Your ogre camps basically act as major settlements that you can just kind of create wherever you want. However, this means that you still feel the urge and are encouraged by the game to take considerable amounts of territory for the finances you can get through that, and just to have lots of friendly territory, yada yada, which means that you are not the ogre's campaign isn't well designed to have you just roaming around, especially because of the way ogre camps work, which is something we'll talk about later. So in light of the current system, the problem I have with contracts is twofold at the start, which is that first, when it's showing who the contracts are coming from, the game seems to be hell-bent on picking neutral factions that often are not terribly friendly with you. And they will often give you a contract that's something along the lines of, hey, I want you to run across this continent and go attack this faction that you've not met yet. Or it's, hey, I want you to attack a faction that you're friendly with in order to make me a neutral faction like you. And I really hate this system. The big thing for me is that I really dislike that the contracts do not prioritize friendly factions. They should. If you're in an area, it should prioritize factions that are your military allies, followed by factions that are your defensive allies, followed by allies that have a non-aggression pact with you, and then it should go towards neutral factions. Like, there should be like a percentage chance that each of those factions can be rolled, but the friendlier they are with you, like the more defensive treaties that you have with them, the higher that percentage chance should be. So if I say have a defensive alliance with, let's say, Vlad von Karstein, he should have something like a 60 or 65 or 75% chance to have a contract with me. Whereas if the border princes I am at peace with, but I have, extreme negative diplomacy with them, even though we're not at war, it should be like a 10 to 15% chance. Because I feel like when I play Ogre Kingdom campaigns, which I've been playing a few recently to really try and get what I want changed about them in my head, it really feels like the game almost deliberately is picking neutral factions that really do not like me. And they often are asking me to attack factions that do like me, which leads to me to my second point, which is that it should be impossible to get a contract that targets allied factions or factions that you have treaties with, in my opinion. Maybe there could be some wiggle room. So maybe if you have not aggression with them or just a trade agreement, you could still get a contract against them because you are ogres. There could be a way to deal with that. But the current system, I feel like, is just very, very punishing if you're forming any kinds of treaties with anyone and I'm not just constantly at war with everyone that you can fight. Honestly, I feel almost like ogres should have a unique way to reset their reliance system. So how reliable they are, because the reliability system is that if you declare war, if you break a treaty with someone, your reliability tanks, which not only means that other factions are more likely to cancel their diplomacy with you at that moment, but it also makes them more likely to declare war on you and also just to completely make your life a living hell. So I almost feel like ogres should have a faster recharge for reliability if they're going to keep it where contracts can be against factions that you have treaties with, or they need to make it where if you have a treaty with the faction, you cannot get contracts against them. It needs to be one of those two systems. If you're going to incentivize me to betray factions, then you need to make it where betraying is not nearly as punished as it is for other factions in the game. I mean, the ogres are supposed to be one of the most true neutral groups in the game, one of the most true neutral factions, in that, you know, they're kind of unreliable and tend to be very mercenary-like in how they handle relationships. So if you want to lean that way, that's great and fine, but that means that the punishment needs to suit that system better. And I feel like it's way too punishing right now to even consider taking those kind of contracts unless you just plan on never having any allies whatsoever. Speaking of contract rewards, one of my issues with contracts is that sometimes the things that are offered are a bit mixed. Like anytime it offers meat, that's terrible. Get that out of there. Contracts should never offer meat as a reward. That is such a terrible, terrible option. It should always have a money reward, a diplomacy reward, and then the only optional thing should be either be a magic item or an ancillary. And furthermore, to make contracts more interesting and engaging, there should be unique items and ancillaries that are only available through this system. Perhaps they could even be items and ancillaries from that faction's unique pool. So for instance, maybe you're able to get access to things that you just couldn't normally. But it should always be that. It should be money, diplomacy buff, and then a magic item or an ancillary, guaranteed. And then the magic item and the ancillary is where the variance really is, where sometimes it's a more common item, sometimes it's a faction unique item, sometimes it's an exclusive rare purple item. That would be great, awesome, exciting. It would actually make things a lot better. Furthermore, I really feel that the gold bonus should be determined by the type of mission, and it should give you the amount of gold you get for the mission should be determined by the type of mission, with a bonus based on how far away it is from the player's territory. So for instance, if you do a mission that requires you to target a army or settlement, it should offer a much higher payout, while the casual ones that I'll talk about a little later should offer a little less. And if it requires you to go far away from where your established territory is, then you should get a bigger financial bonus, which incentivizes you to go on those long journeys. For instance, if I'm playing Scrag the Slaughterer and I've taken over, let's say, the Border Princes, if I get a mission that tells me that I should go down to Kimry and sack Kimry, that should pay exponentially more than telling me that I should go up and sack Carrick-Hearn, which is right next to me, as just kind of an example. The other thing is that it'd be nice to see more types of contracts be made available. For instance, I'd love there to be contracts that are simply about raiding a certain enemy's territory, or maybe using any type of agent action against a particular city or army. Though I will note that if they do allow in these like lower class contracts where it's, hey, I want you to raid this region, or I want you to commit an agent action against this particular army or this particular city. If they do that, there needs to be at least one guaranteed contract per refresh that is going off to attack someone to make sure that you get to keep those big rewards. So I would say ideally it would be you get 2 contracts that are, hey, go attack or raise or occupy a city. And then there should be one contract that's, hey, send an agent over to this place and perform an agent action, or go to this other territory and raid it, just because those are a lot lower risk and a lot easier to do. The final thing I'll say about contracts is that it would be really nice to see upgrades to the tech tree revolving around contracts. So instead of it just increasing the amount of money that you earn, it should also, at minimum, in my opinion, reduce the amount of turns between each refresh. It'd also be nice to see several new techs added, in my opinion, such as expanding the amount of contracts you can have, the maximum, from instead of 3 per refresh, maybe it jumps up to 4 per refresh, and adding additional rewards. So maybe if you get all the way to the end of the tech tree, there's a really high quality tech that makes it where you get double rewards for the items. So instead of only getting 1 item, you get 2 items for every contract, or an item and an ancillary, or 2 ancillaries. Just to make them, make those techs particularly worthwhile. But I think the big one for me would be seeing a reduced turn timer between the refresh. So when the game starts, it's a 10-turn refresh system. And then maybe through the tech tree, you're able to bring it down to like 7 turns over the course of the campaign. I think that would be pretty reasonable. Moving on to camps. Ogre camps are really not super great in their current iteration. They're kind of frustrating. I personally believe that they should absolutely be upgraded to function more like land-based black arcs instead of just stationary cities. While I understand the thinking that led to their current design, it just doesn't fit the ogre narrative, in my opinion, of massive nomadic tribes, and it also just feels bad as a mechanic. The camps should be able to move casually. The only restriction I could even imagine enforcing on them is maybe that they can't go out to sea. So making them like true reverse black arcs, in the sense that the ogre camps are completely landlocked, meanwhile the black arcs are completely sea locked. So they're not able to, go into each other's big territory. If that's not possible, perhaps making it where ogre camps have various features and bonuses that aren't able to function while in naval stance. So if they do go out into the ocean, they're not able to provide any of their buffs or do any of those things because they're out at sea. They have to be on land to do it. But I don't really think it would necessarily be overpowered or unreasonable for them to move around that much. I think that would be I think it'd be fine. Furthermore, the tyrant that leads an ogre camp should be treated exactly like the Black Arc Fleet Master. So grant him a full skill tree with unique skills that revolve around the camps themselves, buffing the camps, allow him to equip items and ancillaries, and also allow heroes to join the camp garrisons. They should also be able to acquire some fun defensive buildings that are unique garrison type structures. So an idea would be, taking from the lore, would be something like a Great Horn structure. So if you build the Great Horn, it gives you an army ability that allows you to summon a unit of Yetis to the battlefield twice per battle. Or maybe there's an alternate version of the structure and you can only have one of them. And maybe the alternate version is unblocked tunnels, which is a structure that would allow for the same thing, but it summons a unit of Gorgers instead of a unit of Yetis, because the Gorgers lurk in all of the tunnels beneath the tribes and are often kept in areas where the tribes dump all their refuse and scraps and things that they don't want, and then the gorgers like eat it, and they also protect the tribes from things coming up underneath them. So like that would be a fun system where it's an either or. So you either can take the building that gives you the Yeti summon, or you take the building that gives you the Gorger summon, or you take neither and use those building slots for like recruitment or economic stuff instead. Also, talking further about camps, the Ogre Mercenaries feature needs to be vastly expanded. At bare minimum, it should be upgraded to match the Total War Warhammer 2 version, which offered all types of Ogre Bulls and Mournfang Riders. I would very much like to see it include Maneater variants. If it was possible, it would be nice to see if a unit does end up buying mercenaries from a player camp, maybe that could grant diplomacy buffs to the faction you're hiring from. Or maybe you get additional gold per turn because the mercenaries are coming from your camps. That'd be really nice. And it would also incentivize players to try and have ogre camps near allied factions, because then those factions would buy mercenaries, which would then give the player money and diplomacy buffs. I think that would be really, really cool. Finally, someone has got to buff Zhao Ming's ogre gimmicks when it comes to the mercenaries. He should be giving them notable buffs to melee attack, melee defense, and weapon strength, in addition to reducing their recruitment cost and upkeep. The current buffs that Zhao Ming gets to ogres are just super lame. They're very, very sad. Moving on to special characters. Greasus Goldtooth. Greasus is an epic character that many people adore, but his current implementation is just disappointing on a number of levels. The biggest thing for me personally is that he's, well, not the biggest thing. Greasus Goldtooth should be the largest ogre in the game, a corpulent god of fat and muscle that dwarfs the likes of Tamarkan or other tyrants. Obviously Tamarkan on foot, not Tamarkan up on, on his toad dragon. I personally don't care if this makes him too vulnerable to missile fire due to size, because that can simply be resolved by increasing his health, missile resistance, and armor, or just by using him cautiously in game to avoid missile units until they're properly swarmed. Please, please make Greasus the fat king that we all need. He needs to be the ultimate dad bod. He really does need to be the big fat lad, and right now he's just small. He's just small. The other issue is that Greasus Goldtooth's animations, in my opinion, need a bit of a serious overhaul. He's just so slow, both at moving and attacking, which has him struggling in damn near every confrontation. If he's going to have the cart instead of the Noblar horde holding him up, he could at least scoot around at a reasonable pace thanks to the mobility scooter. Then his attack animations just need to be retuned to be far more generous. He should be crumping enemy characters with decent ease and smashing entire ranks with reliability. And right now, I feel like whenever I fight with him, although I love him to death, it feels like he gets stuck in that animation where he puts down the scepter of the Titans and he kind of like scoots himself back and forth instead of attacking. So he's just constantly wiggling around and not doing anything instead of dealing damage. And once again, feels bad, needs to be fixed, feels bad. Scrag. So Scrag the Slaughterer should move his start position, in my opinion. While I think it has offered an interesting alternative up until now, the time has come for Scrag to return closer to the Great Maw. Starting somewhere in Grand Cathay or maybe in the Mawgate region would have him in a much more appropriate part of the world that would still offer an interesting and different experience, as he could be encouraged to go north into the Chaos Wastes or east into Grand Cathay. Whereas Greasus Goldtooth obviously is focused much more on the Mountains of Morn themselves and turning his attention to either Grand Cathay or the Darklands. Finally, the tech tree just needs a massive overhaul. The current one is a rather disorganized mess that has quite a few techs which are just garbage tier. But Creative Assembly has been pretty reliable in these updates at really cleaning up and improving the tech trees, So I think they'll manage that just fine. It's just something that they need to do for 6.0. Moving on to the mechanics of the DLC, because I do want to talk a little bit about my ideas about how the DLC could work. Goldfag. The big themes, of course, should be man-eaters and unique contract type stuff. Before we get to that, though, first up is start position. To make it really simple, I would literally just put Goldfag right where Scrag's current start position is. This would have him in the perfect place to begin his legendary career as the greatest mercenary of the old world. When it comes to his faction mechanics, a big thing I'd like to see for him is a unique take on reliability. And at this point, I could really wax lyrical about like what I had originally written down for contracts and reliability, but I am recording this, of course, post that most recent developer interview they did where they talked about what they're thinking of doing for Goldfag's mechanics in regards to like contracts and stuff. And I am very, very excited for what they proposed. The idea about how he is able to pass on the diplomacy penalties that he'll accrue by fulfilling contracts onto his employer, and the fact that he'll be able to just kind of like become almost a part of the faction in a way. And I think that all sounds super duper great. I don't really have a whole lot to add other than it sounds super cool. And I hope they continue to push that forward. I will say, though, I do hope that they really lean into with his contracts being like unique, like extra spicy and cool. I do hope that he's able to get unique items. So, for instance, if he serves like maybe the first time he serves a particular faction type, he gets a unique item out of it. So like the first time he serves the Empire, he gets a special bonus. The first time he serves the Vampire Counts, he gets a special bonus. The first time he serves the Dwarves, he gets a special bonus. I don't think I would make it tied to a particular legendary lord, because then you'd have to make 100 of them, and that sounds like too much. But I think having it where the first time he serves each faction type, race or whatever you want to call it, he gets a really unique item or ancillary that is a thematic bonus. And then from that point forward, he just gets, really nice blue items or whatever. Or maybe he gets access to, unique items from that faction, which could also be cool. And then you could have like a little pool to choose from. But there's a lot of cool things they could do with that. I just really, really hope that he has some things that are exclusive to him, especially because Goldfag's actually a bit unique in that in tabletop, he doesn't have any magic items. Goldfag instead had a rule that I think I've talked about in the past called easy come, easy go, which is that whenever you would play a game with Goldfag, you'd have to roll some dice at the start of the game. And it would basically say, okay, this is how much gold you have. And now you can buy any magic items you want using that money for free. So basically he got a free list of items. So you could give him some really cool stuff, but you didn't know what you were going to roll before the game was basically being set up. So you were like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford the things I want. But you could also allow him to customize before games, which is really cool and unique. So something to lean into that system, where it's like, he doesn't have, I don't know what they're going to do for a quest battle for him. Like, I want him to have a quest battle, but I don't know what it would be about because he doesn't have any items like that unless CA decides to give him one, which is certainly possible. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about would be a unique form of currency. I would actually like to see Goldfag have access to a unique resource that is generated whenever he completes one of his new contracts, which will be used for upgrading man-eaters, which we'll talk about in just a second. I also do think it'd be appropriate when it comes to faction effects that Goldfag man-eaters faction should all have bonus campaign movement, as they are wandering mercenaries at the end of the day, so they should have bonus to campaign movement when running across the map. And I would also think that Goldfag Man-Eater would probably be the best option to have buffs to various black powder units, as there's no other ogre that really touches that part of the roster. Even in the ideal world, which I hope this will be the case, but even if we get like Gark Ironskin is going to be more about like your Rhinox Riders, your Mornfang Cavalry, and maybe your monsters. There's not really like a black powder character, with Golgfag being the closest, because he does at least have a pistol. Anyway, back to what I was discussing a minute ago, the last major feature that I'm really hoping to see with Golgfag would be the unique mechanic to upgrade man-eaters. I think the best way to do this would be that Golgfag has access to a system that allows him to select a man-eater unit and apply upgrades to it, similar to how Throt the Unclean can select and upgrade units. I don't think it should be nearly as large and complex as Throt's system, and it can only affect man-eaters and maybe man-biter Noblars, because they're basically like the man-eaters of the Noblars, so I think that'd be a fine exception. But it should only be able to affect those kinds of units. But the reason I say that is because if you have the trade-off of the list of upgrades is smaller and it can only affect very specific units, that you could justify that it also does not have any downsides. It would probably be also good to have it where, like, early on in the campaign, each unit can only have a singular upgrade, but as the campaign progresses and you do various things, you unlock a higher cap, so each individual unit can have more and more upgrades. Potential upgrades, I think, should be something in like 1 to 5 tiers based on other factions in the game, which represents the man-eaters learning unique skills and gimmicks as they travel around. This should include things like, when it comes to more generic stuff that the man-eaters had access to in tabletop, they should have access to upgrades like poison attacks, vanguard deployment, swift stride, sniper, stalk, and immune to psychology. I also think it'd be really awesome to see unique faction buffs that could be added. For instance, the Beastman's Rowdy passive, Kislev's By Our Blood, the Lizardman's Primal Instincts passive, Norska's Rage ability, from Vampire Counts, maybe the Hunger, from Vampire Coast, Black Powder Aplenty, stuff like that. Alternatively, they could just do more good, solid buffs, things like Frenzy, Unbreakable, Expert Charge Defense, Charge Reflection, etc., along with stat buffs. This would allow for the creation of some extremely powerful troops that feel like they've really picked up some wild skills in other lands and would allow for some hilariously strong armies. I think that would do well enough for factions effects. So just to touch on personal lord effects in regards to Golgfag, I would really recommend the Man-Eater himself having immunity to trespassing penalties, as that just makes sense for him. I would also probably give him a 50% upkeep reduction for Man-Eaters, and then notable buffs for them as well. And then a big increase for discovering and stealing magic items when he wins battles. I will note here that the last thing I'm really, really hoping to see, which is, I feel like probably not going to happen, but I'm hoping for it, is that Golgfag Man-Eater will actually use his pistol and will have a minor range attack that he fires off while he's running around, instead of just being a pure melee character like many of the Ogre Legendary Lords. But we'll have to see. And in any event, that's pretty much all I have to say in regards to what I'm really hoping for the Ogre Kingdom's mechanics. Feel free to let me know down in the comment section if there's anything that really jumps out at you, if you think any of the ideas are particularly interesting or cool, or if you think any of them maybe we should do something different or have a unique approach. I would love to get y'all's feedback in regards to this, especially because I'm really trying to be pretty aggressive right now about putting out videos. So that, especially talking about older mechanics, in the hopes that Creative Assembly might see them and be like, oh, that's a good idea, or that's a good idea. Obviously, I'm not hoping just for my implementation, but for them to hopefully maybe just see some things that can help them make the best possible version of what we'll all be looking forward to. So with that, that brings us to the end of this particular video. I will be back fairly soon to talk about what I would like to see from Skulltaker and Gorbat Ironclaw. Obviously, we do have some fun hints from Creative Assembly about what they're doing with those characters. I don't honestly think I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make a video per se out of like greenskins and corn, because they feel pretty good to me, to be honest. there are very few changes I think I would make to them, if any. So I'll have a think about that. But I really did want to sit down and talk about ogres. So I've done that now, and I'm going to go work on some other stuff. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and I hope you're having a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And a big thank you again for the people who are going out of their way to support me on Patreon. It is deeply appreciated and welcomed. Thank you very much. And by the way, you can follow my Patreon for free now, as I am posting things on there occasionally that are just for public. So even if you just want to join it to maybe keep up with occasional things, and you're like, you just want to be there, you can. So links for that down below if you're interested. Totally cool if not, but it's there if you want it. Anyway, I gotta go. Take care. Bye-bye.